Ever wondered why some men use their emotional baggage as a tool to manipulate women? This phenomenon, often referred to as trauma dumping, is far from innocent sharing. It's a manipulation tactic where one person offloads their trauma onto another without their consent. It's like a game of hot potato where the emotional burden is passed on, often leaving the receiver feeling overwhelmed and confused. So, what makes someone use their pain as a weapon? Stay tuned to understand the psychology behind this damaging behavior. Trauma dumping is not a term you hear every day, but it's a prevalent issue. It's a phrase that may initially sound foreign, even confusing, yet it's a phenomenon that many of us have probably experienced at one point or another. Let's break it down. Trauma dumping is the act of unloading your traumatic experiences onto someone else, often without their explicit consent. Picture this: a friend, a coworker, or a romantic partner suddenly delves into their deepest, darkest experiences, their fears, their hurts, without considering if you're in a space, physically or emotionally, to shoulder that weight. This is not to say that sharing our pain is inherently wrong. After all, human connection thrives on shared experiences, on empathy, on understanding. However, there's a significant difference between seeking support and trauma dumping. The latter often involves a lack of consideration for the other person's boundaries, their own emotional state, or even their willingness to take on such a heavy emotional load. And that's where the real issue lies. Trauma dumping can be incredibly draining for the recipient. It can feel like an emotional tidal wave that crashes over you without warning. It can leave you feeling helpless, overwhelmed, and emotionally exhausted. It's like being handed a weight that you didn't ask for and aren't prepared to carry. Moreover, trauma dumping is often not about seeking genuine support or understanding. It's about offloading pain, about reducing one's own emotional burden at the expense of another's peace. It becomes a form of emotional manipulation, a way of controlling others through guilt, pity, or a sense of obligation. This manipulation is not always intentional or malicious. However, it is imperative to recognize it for what it is. A healthy relationship, whether platonic or romantic, should involve mutual support and understanding, not one-sided emotional unloading. So let's get this straight. Trauma dumping isn't about sharing pain in a quest for healing. It's not about seeking genuine emotional support or understanding. It's about manipulation, about pushing one's pain onto someone else without their consent. It's important to note that trauma dumping isn't about seeking support, it's about manipulation. Now, let's delve into the connection between trauma dumping and narcissism. Narcissism in its core is an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. Now imagine coupling this with the art of trauma dumping. Narcissistic men, skilled in manipulation, often use their past traumas as a weapon to gain sympathy. This sympathy then morphs into a form of control, allowing them to manipulate situations to their advantage. The narrative is often spun in such a way that you find yourself feeling sorry for them, which in turn feeds into their narcissistic supply. Their stories of past traumas, though they may be real or embellished, are not shared for the sake of healing or connection, but as a calculated move to gain power and control. So, remember, narcissistic men expertly use trauma dumping as a tool to control and manipulate. So, how can you protect yourself from falling into a trauma dumping trap? Well, it all starts with being aware. Recognize the signs. It could be a sudden, intense outpouring of personal issues, often early on in a relationship, or a consistent pattern of someone turning every conversation into a therapy session about their woes. Next, understand your boundaries. It's essential to empathize, but you're not a professional therapist. It's okay to say, "I care about you, but I'm not equipped to handle this." Set emotional boundaries and stick to them. This might mean limiting the time you spend talking about their trauma or suggesting they reach out to a professional. Speaking of professionals, don't be afraid to seek one out yourself. If you're feeling overwhelmed or manipulated, a therapist or counselor can provide valuable insights and coping strategies. They can help you navigate these tricky waters with clarity and confidence. Remember, it's not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about preserving your emotional health while encouraging others to seek the help they need. You're allowed to prioritize your well-being. You're allowed to say no. And lastly, know that it's okay to walk away. If someone consistently uses you as their emotional dumping ground, despite your boundaries, it's okay to distance yourself. It's not a failure on your part. It's self-preservation. Remember, it's okay to empathize, but it's not your responsibility to carry others' traumas.